If a rubric communicates expectations, then we need something that communicates performance. This is where feedback comes into play. What is feedback? Well, its definition is information provided by an agent, so a teacher, peer, self, etc., regarding aspects of one's performance or understanding. The purpose of feedback is to reduce the distance between current performance levels and a desired goal, often articulated through learning objectives and rubrics. Hattie found that feedback is one of the most important components in helping students develop their knowledge. In fact, Hattie suggests that feedback is the most powerful single moderator that enhances achievement. Think of feedback this way. Feedback is the other side of the coin to your assessments. Now, oftentimes, professors will use assessments as a snapshot of learning, like a letter grade, as opposed to using assessments to create this opportunity for feedback. It's important that we provide students with the correct type of feedback in order to grow them as learners. According to Hattie and Timperley, feedback should answer 3 questions. What are the goals? This ties back to having clear learning objectives and providing a rubric for each assessment opportunity. What progress is being made toward that goal? Again, the relational feedback that rubrics provide can communicate some of this information. And what needs to be done to make better progress? This speaks to the idea that feedback helps students close the gap between current and desired performance. Current feedback in legal education focuses on an end result, a summative exam. Now, this might tell a student how they performed, a snapshot. It does not help them understand how to get there. When considering how to answer these questions with feedback, Hattie and Timperley suggest that quality feedback will fall into one of 4 primary levels. Task level. Feedback at this level describes the quality of the student's work in relation to the learning objectives and rubric that you've installed for the lesson. Feedback given here is typically corrective feedback, as it directly relates towards correcting misconceptions of students, not missing knowledge. Because well-structured prior knowledge serves as the best predictor of future performance, this type of feedback is important for a student's long-term success. This is an important lesson. Feedback should not target what the student doesn't know. The learner can't make sense of the feedback because it's addressing a hole in their prior knowledge. Feedback should target misconceptions and ill-formed ideas. This way, the student has the opportunity to build up a correct mental model that's integrated into their prior knowledge, and this accurate prior knowledge is the best predictor of their future performance. Process level. Feedback at the process level examines whether or not the process the student utilized matched the process envisioned for a given task. This can include the student's error detection abilities and their ability to recognize when more information is needed. This is actually a slightly less elaborated level than the next one. So here's this idea of metacognition again. Feedback at the metacognitive level addresses the student's self-monitoring and self-regulation abilities. And as we discussed earlier, developing a student's metacognitive skills can lead to better learning outcomes. Feedback that is given at the metacognitive level asks the learner to look inward and assess their own work. This will help them develop confidence in future learning tasks and develop their ability to manage their own progress towards a desired learning goal. Learners with poor metacognitive abilities rely far more frequently on external factors and, as a result, will struggle with more difficult learning tasks as they do not possess the prerequisite skills to control their learning or set proper goals for their learning. Now, you may or may not be familiar with this kind of feedback. It takes knowing the student to do well, but once you get the hang of it, it'll come easily. So, an example of good metacognitive level feedback would be, in order to get quick ideas, try reading the paper's abstracts, then draft an outline of your thoughts. Self-level. Feedback at this level is typically given about affect, about the learners themselves. You might already suspect this, but this type of feedback should be given sparingly, as it focuses not on the information to be learned, but about the affective qualities of the learner. Nice work, that's correct, can have a motivational effect, but it does not bridge the distance between our goals and the student's current levels of comprehension. Of course, those students who are poorer learners might need some bit of encouragement, especially when they do things right. But all in all, self-level feedback should mostly be avoided. How often should we provide feedback? This is one of the biggest dilemmas in legal education. As we talked about earlier during the first year of law school, most courses give a final summative exam. By the time the students receive their grades and feedback, sometimes up to a month after the final, it is of no use to the students in relation to that class. Recent updates to the American Bar Association's accreditation standards, specifically standards 314 and 315, explicitly state that law schools should use formative feedback assessment methods to measure and improve student learning and provide meaningful feedback to students. Formative feedback provides more opportunities for students to see and address the differences in their current conceptual knowledge when compared to the desired goal. These formative feedback opportunities are key into creating better learners. Like rubrics and objectives, feedback isn't the one silver bullet answer, but it is an important and invaluable piece to deep learning. If feedback is directed to the right learner at the right level, they can use that feedback to better engage with and comprehend the to-be-learned materials. For example, students who are low performing need this concrete feedback to help build, and in some cases repair, their mental model to set them up for future success. Keep in mind that feedback is only part of a whole. If the teaching's not providing an environment in which feedback can happen, then you're missing out on a substantial part of the learning process. Feedback can only build on what's already there. You can't give feedback on something that hasn't been mentioned. Though it's a very powerful form of instruction, it happens far too infrequently in education. If you're interested in reading more, I strongly suggest Elizabeth Bloom's recent article called A Law School Game Changer, Transformative Feedback. Hattie and Timperley have also done a lot of work looking into the efficacy of feedback in non-law domains. Their paper, The Power of Feedback, is equally as good. So let's take a minute to go over what we talked about today. Learning objectives are explicit statements that tell our learners what knowledge, skills, and attitudes the learner should have after instruction. Objectives can be attached to a semester, a week, a lesson, or even an assignment. When you're writing learning objectives, make sure they're SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and targeted. Rubrics are a way you can measure your learning objectives. Rubrics are matrices that outline the important criteria for a product and give the learner statements called descriptors that can inform them of their progress as a learner. Rubrics are for the students. That is, it can help guide them to mastery by providing them relative feedback on their performance. These aren't easy to write, but getting started is as simple as a Google search. Remember, for learners, having something is better than nothing. And finally, feedback. Feedback's the flip side of the rubrics idea. Good feedback will fall along one of four levels: task, for improving a student's understanding; process and metacognitive, to improve their self-regulation abilities; and self-feedback, for those students that need a little affective pick-me-up. When these three come together, you can be sure to have a fun, effective, and cutting-edge classroom.